You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He is Macon Gillespie from Ole Miss on SI. And fall camp has come to an end. The Chucky Mullins Courage Award has been announced, and we're going to turn the page a little bit to Furman as well, but we're going to start with the Chucky Mullins Courage Award winner, JJ Pegues, who, by the way, John, he's going to do something a little bit strange, and he's going to wear 38 at home, which I understand that. And most of the time, and most of the people that want to see people wear 38 is going to be home games, but he's going to wear 89 on the road. And that is at the best case weird.
Yeah, I think it's strange. Now, I do think from all accounts, I think JJ is very deserving of this award.
Yes.
Just from everything I've heard. I think that he has kind of been that kind of leader, I think, since he got back to Oxford, got to Ole Miss. I do think it's strange wearing the 38 at home and the 89 on the road, and I know you and I may differ on this, but to me, I'm fine with the jersey patch too. I'm okay with the jersey patch and not changing the number, but doing both is a little strange to me. I'm not 100% sure of the reasoning behind it. There probably is a reason, but I have not asked or sought that out. So, but I do think on a different side of things that it's very cool for him to have won it, being an Oxford guy and a guy who didn't start out at Ole Miss but wound up coming back to Oxford. I thought that was really, really cool.
Unbelievably deserving guy. I have no problems with the selection of him doing that at all. I do think that Ole Miss at some point needs to get back to giving it to defensive backs, or at least put them in the rotation, because that was originally a defensive back award. But, you know, it is what it is. And I do think that somebody in my comments earlier in the weekend talked about how brand is important for these players, and changing their numbers would change their brand. Well, if it's that important to you, don't accept the award. That number 38 for people my age and older, it means something. We remember seeing Chucky laying on that field. I mean, I was a teenager when that happened. So it means a little bit. And I understand that you have brand and you have all this stuff that's going on, but I do think that it needs to be respected a little bit, and not just go into the most improved player in spring awards that's going to come out that nobody even knows they exist. Chucky Mullins does not need to end up going into that category. Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that's necessarily the direction it's headed, but I do understand what you're saying. You know, to me, the straddling of the two is a strange choice. But, you know, again, there may be a reason behind it. It may have to do with branding. I really don't know. But I mean, I also understand. I mean, Patrick Willis wore the 38 jersey patch, if I'm not mistaken.
He was the one that started it, by the way. And the reason he started it was the 3 years before he won it, the number 38 got injured. It was literally a superstition type thing for him, that he was afraid to wear the number 38 because of what had happened. And it was one of those things, feel good, look good, and all of that stuff. But that is how the jersey patch originated.
Which I still don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think that's
just own it one way or another, right?
Do what now?
Just own it one way or another.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. But you know, it is what it is, and but again, he is very deserving of it, and I do understand fully why the staff chose him for that honor.
Yeah, it's really cool. And turning the page a little bit, fall camp has come to a close. On tomorrow will be the Lane Kiffin press conference, the first one of a game week. We'll get a fake depth chart that actually isn't a real depth chart that has about 37 oars on it. And we'll ask him all sorts of questions about Furman, and Lane Kiffin will do his best Lou Holtz imitation, talking about the weak sisters of the poor. And that is pretty cool. But we do need to put a bow on fall camp. Who are your standouts from this fall camp?
Well, I think I'd be amiss to not mention the defensive line. I think kind of as a whole, as a unit. And Lane's even said that too. That I mean, the defensive line has owned at times some of those scrimmage situations that they've had. One that we haven't necessarily talked about, that Jackson Harris mentioned to me. He really liked what he saw from Micah Davis, actually, which is not necessarily a surprise because he's obviously talented, but it might not be a name that you were expecting to hear here at this stage of fall camp. So, but I think for the most part, the defensive front deserves that level of recognition that they've kind of been getting. And it's a combination of guys. I mean, it's really the unit as a whole is kind of how it's evolved and come together like that.
Yeah, it's really, really cool, honestly, with what they're doing on the defensive line. And Nick Saban, as I record this, and just to let everybody know, we record this on a Friday, so that even though the games have happened and college football is underway, we do not know that. But Nick Saban on Friday was on the Pat McAfee show and basically said that these are the reasons why Ole Miss is going to be really good. And Nick Saban is talking about Ole Miss's offensive and defensive line as being major players in what's going on, and why Ole Miss is going to look like a top level, elite level SEC team this season is because of their trench play that they're going to have. A lot of that has to do with that defensive line, but the offensive line is going to get a little bit better going against them.
Absolutely, yeah. And Saban knows why Alabama and Georgia beat Ole Miss last season, or one of the key factors in that at least. And that being trench play, that being Ole Miss not matching up in the trenches against the Alabamas and the Georgias. And to hear Saban talk and, just kind of looking at eye tests and stuff, it seems like Ole Miss matches up a lot better against those teams this year than it did a year ago. And obviously it only has to face Georgia this year out of those two. So it doesn't take on Alabama. So that bodes really well when you're getting that level of praise from Nick Saban on what he viewed as a deficiency in years past, now being improved. That's a really positive sign.
Yeah, and we'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, we will continue to talk about fall camp, and we will turn the page to the Furman Paladins. We have been waiting for this moment ever since Ole Miss dispatched of the Penn State Nittany Lions. College football is finally here. But first, I do want to let you know, hey, Locked On Ole Miss fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do, honestly. It's called Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of Ole Miss? From recruiting players, hiring coaches, overseeing training camps, and scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling the offensive plays during the game. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but it'll shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as well, when you want and how you want. And of course, we have a special offer for the Locked On Ole Miss fans. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, all one word, inside the game store to receive a free boost for your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk so it'll get your team off to a great start. So download it at ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the App Store as Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. And Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. We all know Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. There's not really a bad seat in the place, but Game Time has this ability to let you see exactly what the view is from that seat before you buy it. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. They take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I might even be able to help you out with tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the defensive line is a major story of practice per John. What are the other storylines that, before we put a bow on this fall camp, that we need to think about?
Well, I think you mentioned one before we went to break, and that's the offensive line, right? I mean, I don't mean to just zone in on the trenches here, but to me, the offensive line shuffling is still kind of a story that we're going to be looking at in these early weeks. Trying to determine who's going to be at exactly what position along that offensive line. Jackson Harris a couple days ago took a stab at his idea of what a kind of depth chart will look like for Ole Miss in week one, based on what he's kind of seen at these limited viewings at practice. And there's still a lot up in the air with that unit, just kind of determining what, who's going to be where. And also, I mean, another one that is not trench related, waiting on Deion Smith, I think is still obviously a big one, right? Figuring out when that exactly is going to happen, just kind of a waiting game right now. That's going to be something to watch in these early portions as well.
Yeah, it should be really cool. I'm fired up. Now, the kinder, gentler fall camp, and honestly, I think it was Ross Dellinger put out a tweet on Friday that they're taking steps to eliminating the spring transfer portal window, which, inside baseball for everybody watching this, coaches hate the spring transfer portal window with the fire of 1,000 suns. They literally hate that. So this is good news. And the Grow Bowl games that Ole Miss had this past year, it wasn't because they were trying to think outside the box and do something different. They were trying to show and have a depth chart as little as possible to avoid that spring transfer portal window.
Yeah, and you have to understand why coaches hate that, right? I mean, Lane has kind of talked about it in hypothetical situations in media availabilities over the last couple of years. A guy transfers in, is at one school for the spring, then transfers out again, and is at another school for the fall. I mean, that you need to know kind of what your roster is going to look like in the spring when you're getting all that stuff together. And with that spring window, I mean, you don't have it as much.
Yeah, and it should be really interesting. And everybody's going to say, well, what about the window being open during the postseason? It's like, calm down, everybody. If you're in the game, nobody's going to transfer out of that, and you're going to have extended times after you get eliminated. That's the way this works.
Yeah. Yeah, and the system is still evolving in a lot of ways, and maybe one day it will kind of settle into something. But I think we've still got kind of a period of change going ahead of us.
Yeah, it's going to eventually settle down into something that's manageable, but it's getting there, and it's always in that the whole thing is always about getting there.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
So let's turn the page a little bit. Fall camp is over. Let's move over to the Furman Paladins. Now, I was going off of what they did the last year and the year before, and they were kind of a service academy type offense, but apparently that offense has evolved. They've lost their quarterback to Jacksonville State. This is a team that Ole Miss should probably 50-7. I would not be surprised if Furman does what Mercer did a year ago and gets Ole Miss on a long one. That would not surprise me, but I do think this would be like a 50-7 type game. That's where I'm kind of leaning right now.
Yeah, this isn't a game that Ole Miss should struggle with. I mean, that's kind of a duh point, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss is a little vanilla as far as what it does.
Vanilla, yeah.
In week one, yeah, because I mean, going into this game, you kind of go in with the mindset that, hey, if we play properly, we don't lose this game. So I mean, you can kind of not let all your dogs out of the house at the same time, but we'll see. I mean, but this is a game that Ole Miss should handle pretty easily, in my opinion. If they don't, and it's kind of squirrely there late, something's amiss.
Yeah. And this is not North Dakota State. This is not South Dakota State. This is not Montana State. This is a playoff team, but it is like that next tier of FCS team. So it's not the same animal. Like this past Saturday, Montana State was a 12-point favorite on the road against an FBS opponent, against New Mexico. This is not those guys. Although it wouldn't matter if Ole Miss was playing them, honestly, this year. But it is what it is. Turning the page in the game a little bit, the next question and the thing that people are going to be watching for is which backup quarterback is the first one off of the bench. It's the story of essentially all stories in this game, because that quarterback competition is going to be huge. I've heard many stories during this fall camp about how Austin Simmons has performed really well. I think he might be the dude.
I think it's possible for sure. It will be interesting to see if the game gets to that point, when you're pulling your starters out. It would be kind of funny if Lane trolled a little bit and just threw somebody random back there at quarterback who's not even listed as a quarterback. He won't do that, but I think that would be funny if he did. That will be something to watch. That will be somewhat of a storyline to follow game within the game a little bit there late. If Ole Miss is up by 47 or whatever and, says, all right, it's time to get Jackson out. That will be something interesting to keep an eye on. And it could be Simmons. I do think it will probably be Simmons or Howard. Although I do think A.J. Maddox can be in the mix next year, potentially. But he doesn't have as much under his belt right now as those two. So,
and also everybody watching this, do not expect Lane to name a backup quarterback this season, this whole season, for the same reason that they did the Grove Bowl games and the depth chart stuff. They have to make it through the December transfer portal window with a quarterback to make sure that everything's kind of copacetic and good to go. But I do think Austin Simmons probably has a leg up at this point. And I do think it would be hilarious if Lane Kiffin just threw A.J. Maddox out there first against Furman.
Yeah. I mean, like, what are you going to lose at that point? I mean, just to kind of play your cards extra close to the vest a little bit in that scenario. But no, he has no benefit in naming a backup quarterback. If something were to happen to Jackson this year where he has to miss a little bit of time, you decide something then. But right now, you don't borrow trouble by naming a backup quarterback.
Right now, this is what I think happens. If for some reason Jackson gets nicked up and it's not long-term, it's just something where he misses a series or two, I think Walker Howard might be the quarterback that goes in just because of seniority and trust in the system and all of that stuff. But if Jackson's out for an extended period of time, I think that's when you see Austin, they make the transition over.
Could be. Yeah, that's not a bad way of thinking about it. Hopefully nothing happens to get to that point, but we'll just, if and when, I mean, that might be the way it would go.
Yeah. Should be pretty cool indeed. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. John Macon Gillespie from Ole Miss on SI. We got going on this weekend, John?
Well, we're finally getting into game week. Obviously we'll be treating this like any other game week, media availability stuff on Monday, can maybe spread out some of that on Tuesday and Wednesday, but we'll be looking at, I know how exciting it sounds, looking at Furman and their playmakers and kind of what they bring to the table a little bit. We did some of that in the off season, but more of an in-depth look this week. And then, we'll give some game predictions late in the week, and then pretty full slate of game coverage on Saturday because I know people are itching for it.
Yeah, and I had Joe DeLeon, the FCS expert on the internet, basically come in and talk about the Furman Paladins for the crossover show that's airing on Thursday. Went ahead and recorded a couple of segments with him, and that's how I was able to get this information about the quarterback and the offense and the defensive line and all of that stuff. So, yeah, it's game week. We're in it. We have finally made it to the starting gate.
Yeah, and it's always a fun spot of the year, and it should be really fun, at least for the next couple months.
All right, John, thank you very much for stopping by, and we'll talk to you next week on the pregame show.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, man. All right, bye.